Welcome to Space Nexus. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In a landmark 6-3 decision that sent shockwaves through the nation, the Supreme Court struck down Maryland's ban on semi-automatic rifles, including the widely debated AR-15. The ruling, delivered after months of heated arguments and public anticipation, marks one of the most significant moments in the ongoing battle over gun rights in America. With a single decision, the court instantly invalidated similar laws in 9 other states and the District of Columbia, reshaping the legal landscape for millions of Americans. The ripple effects were immediate, as state legislatures and local governments scrambled to respond to the sweeping change. The ruling in Snope v. Brown is a seismic shift in the Second Amendment debate, igniting both celebration and outrage across the country. Streets outside courthouses filled with passionate demonstrators, their voices echoing the deep divide that has long defined the gun debate in America. Gun rights advocates call it a historic affirmation of constitutional rights, hailing the decision as a long overdue recognition of the right to self-defense and personal freedom. For many, it is a victory that validates years of activism and legal challenges. Meanwhile, gun control supporters warn of increased danger and a proliferation of military-style weapons in communities already scarred by gun violence. They fear the decision will make it harder to prevent future tragedies and protect vulnerable populations. The decision sets a powerful precedent, making it far harder for states and cities to restrict a wide range of firearms. Legal experts predict a wave of new lawsuits challenging existing gun regulations, as courts across the country grapple with the implications of the Supreme Court's ruling. The justices' split along ideological lines underscores the nation's deep divisions, not just within the court, but across society. The debate over gun rights and public safety has never been more polarized. This is not the end of the gun debate, but the beginning of a new, more contentious chapter. Across the country, lawmakers, activists, and ordinary citizens are bracing for the next round of legal and political battles. The story of how we reach this moment is rooted in decades of legal battles, shifting public opinion, and the ongoing tension between individual liberty and public safety, a struggle that continues to shape the American experience. The legal battle began in the wake of a national tragedy. After the devastating events at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Maryland lawmakers responded by passing the Firearm Safety Act of 2013. This sweeping legislation banned the sale and possession of assault-style rifles, aiming to prevent similar mass shootings and protect public safety. The law was one of the strictest in the country, and it quickly became a flashpoint in the ongoing debate over gun control in America. Gun owners, advocacy organizations, and rights groups immediately challenged the law in court. They argued that the ban infringed on their constitutional rights under the Second Amendment, which they believed guaranteed the right to own and use these types of firearms for self-defense and other lawful purposes. The case quickly gained national attention, drawing passionate supporters and opponents from across the country. In a series of rulings, lower federal courts upheld Maryland's ban. Judges reasoned that assault-style rifles were weapons of war, not typically used for self-defense, and therefore not protected by the Second Amendment. These decisions set a precedent, reinforcing the idea that states could regulate certain types of firearms in the interest of public safety. Despite growing controversy and a split among federal courts on the issue, the Supreme Court repeatedly declined to intervene. This left the legal landscape unsettled, with different states enforcing different rules and confusion mounting over the true scope of the Second Amendment. Everything changed in 2022, when the Supreme Court issued its landmark Bruin decision. The court established a new stricter test for evaluating gun laws. Any regulation must be consistent with the nation's historical traditions of firearm ownership. This ruling sent shockwaves through the legal community and forced courts to reconsider existing gun control measures. Seizing this opportunity, the plaintiffs in Snope v. Brown filed an emergency petition. They argued that the Bruin decision fundamentally changed the legal landscape, making Maryland's ban unconstitutional under the new standard. A powerful dissent from Justice Clarence Thomas, along with mounting public and legal pressure, finally persuaded the Supreme Court to take up the case. The nation watched closely as the highest court prepared to weigh in. Recognizing the urgency and national significance, the Supreme Court fast-tracked the case, setting the stage for a historic ruling that could redefine gun rights in America. The outcome would not only determine the fate of Maryland's law, but also set a precedent that could reshape gun regulations across the entire country, affecting millions of Americans. The stakes could not have been higher. Communities, lawmakers, and advocacy groups on both sides of the debate anxiously awaited the court's decision, knowing it would have far-reaching consequences. The Supreme Court's answer would reverberate far beyond Maryland's borders, shaping the future of gun rights and regulations for generations to come. The Second Amendment's meaning has been fiercely debated since its ratification in 1791. For much of U.S. history, courts linked the right to bear arms to militia service, allowing broad regulation. In the late 20th century, a movement reframed it as an individual right, culminating in the 2008 Heller decision, which affirmed the right to possess firearms for self-defense. Heller struck down D.C.'s handgun ban but acknowledged the right was not unlimited. The 2010 McDonald case extended this to the states, but left open questions about dangerous and unusual weapons. The 2022 Bruin decision demanded gun laws be judged solely by historical tradition, setting the stage for today's ruling. The AR-15's fate would now hinge on whether it fit within that tradition. In oral arguments, Maryland's attorney argued the AR-15 is a weapon of war, too dangerous for civilian use, and that history supports regulating such arms. She cited early American bans on especially dangerous weapons, insisting the founders never intended to protect arms of such lethality. Law enforcement and medical groups warned of catastrophic consequences if the ban was struck down. The challengers countered that the AR-15 is the most popular rifle in America, used for lawful purposes like self-defense and sport. They argued that common use status places it under the Second Amendment's protection, as affirmed in Heller. The AR-15, they said, is not a machine gun, and history does not support banning entire classes of effective firearms. The core question: does the Second Amendment protect modern, widely owned semi-automatic rifles? The court's answer would redefine the boundaries of gun rights. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority in a landmark Supreme Court decision, declared that firearms in common use for lawful purposes cannot be banned by the government. This phrase, common use, has become a pivotal standard in Second Amendment law, shaping how courts evaluate gun regulations across the country. With millions of AR-15s owned by Americans, Thomas ruled that the rifle is undeniably common, and thus protected by the Constitution. He emphasized that the widespread ownership of such firearms for lawful purposes, like self-defense and sport, places them firmly within the scope of constitutional protection. He dismissed arguments about military features as irrelevant, stating the Second Amendment covers arms suitable for both self-defense and militia service. According to Thomas, the distinction between civilian and military-style weapons is not a valid basis for regulation, as the founders intended citizens to have access to arms that could serve both roles. The opinion also rejected the dangerous and unusual exception, finding no historical precedent for banning an entire class of common firearms. Thomas argued that unless a weapon is both rare and especially dangerous, it cannot be excluded from constitutional protection simply because of its design or capabilities. Thomas argued that the founders did not ban weapons based on lethality or rate of fire, so modern governments cannot either. He pointed to historical records showing that early Americans had access to the most advanced firearms of their time, reinforcing the idea that technological innovation does not justify new bans. The ruling sets a high bar for any future gun regulation, requiring clear historical analogs. Lawmakers must now demonstrate that any restriction on firearms has a direct precedent from the nation's founding era, making it much harder to justify new limits. The decision's logic threatens not just assault weapon bans, but also magazine limits and other restrictions. Laws that were once considered reasonable are now vulnerable to legal challenges as courts must apply this new, stricter standard. The conservative majority has fundamentally reshaped American gun rights, expanding the scope of the Second Amendment and limiting the government's ability to regulate firearms. The legal landscape for firearm regulation is now dramatically altered, with courts across the country re-examining existing laws and future proposals under this powerful new precedent. In a passionate dissent, Justice Sotomayor warned the majority's decision misreads history and will have deadly consequences. She argued the court ignored the real-world impact of mass shootings and the unique lethality of AR-15-style rifles. The dissent accused the majority of imposing a rigid historical test that ties lawmakers' hands in the face of modern threats. Sotomayor insisted the founders never intended to prevent bans on exceptionally dangerous weapons. She called the ruling a death sentence for countless innocent Americans. The dissent serves as a rallying cry for those who believe the court has gone too far. The debate over gun safety and constitutional rights is now more polarized than ever. The Supreme Court's decision triggered immediate upheaval in state governments. States with assault weapon bans scrambled to respond, while gun rights groups launched lawsuits to overturn remaining restrictions. Democratic leaders vowed to find new ways to regulate. But legal experts doubt such measures will survive. Law enforcement agencies face confusion and concern about a sudden influx of powerful rifles. Gun manufacturers and retailers saw a surge in demand and stock prices. The American firearms market and the political landscape changed overnight. Professor Mary Ann Franks calls the Snope decision the most radical gun rights ruling in U.S. history. She warns that as more people buy a weapon, it becomes harder to regulate, creating a dangerous feedback loop. In states where bans were struck down, AR-15s will soon return to store shelves, changing the sense of public safety. The ruling nationalizes the gun debate, taking power from states and fueling political battles ahead of the 2026 and 2028 elections. Every major form of gun control, magazine limits, red flag laws, licensing, now faces legal jeopardy. The court has opened Pandora's box and the legal chaos will take years to resolve. For now, the only certainty is that gun regulation is weaker than ever. The future of American gun laws is more uncertain than at any time in recent memory. The Supreme Court's decision in Snope versus Brown has not ended the gun debate, it has shifted it to new battlegrounds. States must decide whether to repeal or rewrite their laws, but most efforts will face steep legal hurdles. Gun control advocates are mobilizing for political action, while gun rights groups push for further deregulation. The fight has moved from the courts to the ballot box, with both sides urging supporters to stay engaged. The ruling dramatically curtails states' power to regulate firearms, making military-style rifles constitutionally protected. The future of gun laws now depends on upcoming elections and countless court battles. America's debate over guns, safety, and freedom has entered a new, unpredictable era. Staying informed and engaged is more critical than ever.